It's Breakfast with Friends, and thank you for choosing CCFM this Thursday morning, the 11th of January. Joining us now in studio is Nico Kleynhans, a familiar favorite voice here on CCFM. Nico, a happy new year to you. How's it going?
Well, it's going well. It's always good when one has new beginnings, as it
True
is
story.
at the beginning of a new month and of a new year.
Hmm.
As a financial planner, there are certain things that we have to do, and especially if, like me, I look at holistic financial planning. And what all of us are doing, all the certified planners are doing at this point of the year, is we have to understand how microeconomics works, how macroeconomics works, and then we've got to understand how the intersection of economics and government policy, geopolitics, both in terms of local and international politics, because that is going to affect what happens in the economies locally and the economies around the world. So we are spending a lot of time doing that kind of research and getting our minds to understand what is happening. So I'm spending a lot of time looking at what government ministers are saying. And there are times that I wish I had the humor of Trevor Noah, because it is very funny listening to what they are saying, and you're wondering how this person got to be a government minister, because their understanding of what they're talking about sometimes just doesn't make much sense at all. But I'm going through all of that right now because I do need to understand what government strategy is, especially in that we're having a year of elections. And so I've got to understand where government priorities are and what it is they're wanting to achieve. I also need to understand what is going to happen around ESCOM. So, on the national level, ESCOM is an important factor because it's going to affect economic activity in South Africa. And then I've also got to understand for the Western Cape, what is our Premier's attitude towards ESCOM? What is his policy for our province? Because is he going to be able to protect us from 2 levels of load shedding? When is it going to be that he can protect us from 3 levels of load shedding? Because that makes a massive difference for us here in the Western Cape. And it's not always easy to understand what his strategy is, because there's a lot of technical stuff when he speaks. And so often you have to pose separate questions to try and get clarification on when we're going to reach that magical point where we can be protected from 3 levels of load shedding. Because whatever National Electricity Minister says, we are going to be living with load shedding for quite a number of years. It's not something that's going to go away in a couple of months' time. And then obviously, I'm also interested in the business cycle, because that's going to affect most of our pockets when it comes to debt repayments. Now, this means that a lot of my work can just be opinions, and that's dangerous. So, one of the things I look at is, how do we quantify those opinions? How do we measure those opinions? How do we try and make it more scientific? And one of the things I do is I turn to the university, Northwest University, their business school. They've got a thing called the Policy Uncertainty Index. And this index allocates basically 100 points. If it's 100 points, your country is in disaster. If it's 50 points, then the good news is more or less equal to the bad news. So your index needs to be below 50. And they bring out this index on a quarterly basis. And so I look at that index to help me, stopping me from jumping off the roof and stopping my personal opinions from influencing too much of what the reality is. It gives me a measure of neutrality, at least. Now, in the third quarter of 2023, the index stood at 71 points, which is bad. And that was largely because of what was happening at ESCOM. At the last quarter, it dropped to 65, so it's moving in the better direction. And like I say, we need to try and get it down to 50. And to get it to 50, we're needing to get more good news. So, what are some of the factors that could be considered good news for this particular year? The first factor would be the interest rates. It should drop, because when you look at where the Reserve Bank is and what they're looking at, we are ticking the boxes. The interest rates should start dropping. And when the interest rates drop, most of us will have a little more money left at the end of a month because our debt repayments will drop. The petrol price will drop again. And we've had a couple of price drops in the past couple of months, and that will feed through to the inflation. And when inflation drops, that also helps the interest rates drop a little further. The global economy will grow. Fortunately, not every government is incompetent, and the world economy is turning, the cycle is turning, and world economic activity will ultimately feed through to South Africa as well. The USA has agreed to extend their free trade agreement to Africa, and that agreement will be signed before their next election. And that's really important, because if Trump wins out there, nobody can predict what he's going to do. So that agreement has to be signed before the next election in the USA. Then the other thing that some of you are going to be surprised by is that the banks and the insurance institutions are finally able to sign up to offer Bitcoin and the cyber currency investments. Now, they've already registered, they haven't been given permission to trade. And why that's good news is because where the criminal activity is on these platforms. And if the banks and the insurance platforms have got themselves registered, it removes some of the risk that a lot of us were worried about. And that makes that platform a little easy. So if you then want to do investments, there's going to be a safer platform that you can use. And that is going to come out, I imagine, in the next 12 months, but you will have to be taxed on it. So you're not going to avoid that tax. The other thing is the election is going to cost the ANC. I estimate up to 100 members of parliament are going to lose their seats. That, in a sense, is good news, because whenever you've got a monopoly and a party can just do what it likes without worrying about any kind of real debate happening, that is unhealthy. It's bad for democracy. And so the mere fact that that party is going to have to form coalitions, it means that it will strengthen what can happen. So if you are hoping that suddenly one of the smaller parties is going to run the government, no, that's not realistic. Not unless you manage to get more friends than you have to participate in registering and voting, and unless more of the smaller parties get to form coalitions. But coalitions hopefully will reduce corruption. So I see that as a good factor. Will this year be stress-free? No. No, it's not going to be stress-free. We've got to resolve two particular wars that are going to affect the world particularly bad, and that is Ukraine and Palestine. It's got to get sorted out. No matter how much we choose one or the other side, it cannot be allowed to continue. And we have to get that resolved. And as usual, there's so much of a political agenda there, I can't see it easily coming to get sorted out. Will the ANC keep going ahead the way it is? No, I'm hoping that the ethical wing of the ANC, and remember, an entire organization is not unethical. It's a factor within an organization that is unethical. I'm hoping the people who survive are the ethical part. And I'm hoping they're going to be able to dump the criminals within that. So where do I see the future going for this year? We're going to have to be more strategic. You're going to have to more holistic discussions with your certified financial planner. You're going to have to be more careful in your discussions. And if you're hoping that our discussion with them for the year is going to help, no, you're going to need to be more careful than that if you're going to survive 2024. But it's the good news generally, and I think it's going to be better than it was last year. Have a good year.
Thank you so much, Nico Kleynhans, and a good year for you too, sir. May God bless you richly.
Thank you.